Hey guys, Jonathan at Marshall Custom Models here. Well, I want to talk a little bit about some sanding. This is the 1350 TOS Enterprise, and as you can see, I've got this black line all the way down the ship. Now, what I did different on this is you can see this line right here. This is the factory line. Okay, so technically, this was in two pieces, two halves, the right and left side, and you glued them together. Well, the thing I noticed about this Enterprise last time I built it is it made it really difficult to squeeze the shuttle bay in there. It made it difficult to get any of these lights or the back torpedo launcher. It made it very difficult to get any of those lit and whatnot, so I wanted to try something a little different on this. I also needed to try it because my normal plug that goes on the bottom. Well, I put it on the bottom, and if I had the two halves come together, then I would not have been able to get a strong enough joint right there. So what I did was I took a Dremel tool and I cut along the hull all the way across on both sides. What this allowed me to do was to create a top and bottom half instead of a sides half. I went through and I glued the two sides together and I carbon fibered them. You can't see inside right now, but I carbon fibered them, as you can see in a photo. I did that on the top and bottom. Now what this allowed me to do, it allowed me to put the shuttle bay in, but as you can see on the shuttle bay, I was able to get it smooth. See, there we go. I was able to get it smooth across the back, as you can see right here. Whereas a lot of times, since this is a separate piece, when you put it in, it creates a seam right there. So it allowed me to get that smooth. It allowed me to drill these holes. I have 3 LEDs right there powering those. I have 3 LEDs right here powering this, and it allowed me to get a much stronger joint here on the bottom. I filled in this hole. This is the Polar Lights hole. This is their mounting hole. I was able to fill that in. Now, by doing that, I opened myself up to a lot of sanding trouble, because when you put these in, it's not going to be consistent size. As you can see, I got some black and then I got some white on top. The gap in between is not consistent all the way across. And so I had to fill this in with styrene. You know, I chose the black because from my model store, that's the thickest gauge you can get. And then I put some thinner white in there to help fill in the gap, so that way it's not just resin. And I did it all the way across the back to the shuttle bay. Now again, what this did, and as you can see in the photo, it left a lot of plastic overhanging, which requires a whole lot of sanding. And I was wanting to talk about how I do that to create this curved, smooth surface ready for minor gap filling. I take a Dremel tool and I cut as much out of the plastic as absolutely possible without getting to the hull. Once that's done, I take this file. I bought it in a set from Lowe's. I don't remember which one this is, but it's actually meant for wood. And as you can see, it's got really deep teeth on there. Even on this back side, it's got real deep teeth. And what this does is it chews through styrene nicely. I was able to sand all of this down with this file, both sides. I did that last night. Took me about an hour and a half to sand all this down, because you don't really want to use a Dremel, as it heats the styrene up and it can melt it. So you got to do something slow enough, and this is what I'm wanting to get into. Which processes to choose, basically. I tend to choose doing it by hand. Now, yes, this takes a lot longer, but I'm able to control more the angles, the smoothness, the contours. I'm personally able to control that more by doing it by hand than using a Dremel. Now, some downsides to doing it by hand. One, it takes an hour and a half. Your arm and hand get really tired because you are having to exert a lot of energy. Two, the problem with using a file such as this is it deeply scores the plastic. Now, this is the top portion to a 12-inch Jupiter 2, and as you can see those lines? It scores the plastic. Now you can get some of those out with the file, but most of them are there. And these are some pretty deep lines. Primer filler won't fill it up, so normally you'd have to use putty. But if you left it that way, the whole ship would be green from putty. So this is what I do. I use this to rough it in. I get my curve back, and I don't even worry about the scratches. I try to take some out, but I really don't even worry about it. This is designed to get smoothed and the curve. Then what I do is I come in with some 220 grit wet dry sandpaper. I buy this from Harbor Freight. It is very cheap. It does come apart in the water after a while, but by that time you need more anyways. It's cheap, but it works great for this. Now the 220, you're going to have to hit it quite a while to get rid of a lot of those deep grooves. But after a while, the grooves are going to go away. Now again, the problem with that is it leaves scratches. Scratches that are still a little bit too deep for primer filler to fix. So then, from there, I use 500 grit wet dry sandpaper. Same stuff from Harbor Freight. I think this stuff it's like $2.50 for 10 sheets. I use this for all my models. It works very well. It is cheap. It gets clogged up fast, but by that time, it's gone. You've used it so much, it's gone from a 500 to a 1000 grit, and you need a new piece anyways. So then I take this 500 grit and I sand the whole thing again. After I've already sanded it with the file, sanded it the whole thing with the 220, now I'm sanding the whole thing with the 500. What that does is it gets rid of the deep scores in the plastic and makes it a much smoother surface with scratches in it. See if I can get some. You can see some minor scratches all along there. But these are the kind of scratches that are so fine, primer filler will fill it up. Now what this allows me to do is, all I need to do is put primer or gap filler along this main seam. But since I allowed the resin to ooze through, as you can see in the photo, I only have major holes. I really don't have to put it along the whole thing. I will, just for safety purposes, but the resin, the epoxy, I use that as my gap filler. So now, all I have to worry about is the seam for the putty, instead of having to putty the whole thing, just the seam. So it's a long process, so again, it took me a couple hours to sand down with this. It's taken me 3 hours to sand down using the 250 to 500 grit process. So you're talking 5-6 hours is what you're talking about. And also, I had a lot more I had to do, as you can see in the photo. I took a lot of styrene rod that's just sprues, and I glued it to the ship. And what this allowed me to do is to create shelves. When I smashed the pieces together, I could get it level, I could get them flush, and I had a lot of meat that I could put my clamps on, because I use these Irwin micro grip. These are great for gluing the saucer together, and when I had those little shelves, as you can see, let's see, there we go. I had those pieces of styrene. It would sit on those pieces of styrene, and I could really crank down on this thing and smash it tight again. So again, so going back to, it is a long process. It does take a while, but it also comes down to what is easier for you and how good do you want it to look. Some guys I know have a faster process that's easier for them. It's not easier for me, so I go this process. And then I have other guys who are okay with seeing some scratches, other guys who aren't. So you just have to decide, what are you willing to look at, and then how much time are you willing to put in it, because this does take time. So, alright guys, well, I just wanted to show you what the Enterprise is looking like so far. I've got it all sanded down. I'm going to put some gap filler on it. I have a little bit to do right there. You can see that that gap right there between the shuttle bay wall and the hull. I have to fill that in with some styrene and then some putty. So I'll get this coated with putty, then I'll let it cure overnight, and then I'll sand it again tomorrow, and by tomorrow it'll be ready for primer filler, and then start working on prepping it for paint. Alright guys, hope you're enjoying the build. If you have any questions, let me know.